This is Questions of Life. We're looking at fake news and what the truth is. This is the next part of our conversation. Now, Annie, alongside that, has sent us in an email. She said, as Christians, we believe the Bible is an accurate account and we live our faith by it. But Muslims also think the Quran is correct, and they are just as sure of their faith as we are of ours. There are masses of news articles out there in both religions, both saying their version is correct. I know there are similarities with characters from both the Bible and the Quran, but how do we know for sure which is the correct version?
I think at the end of the day, it's important to research. It's important to look into it.
Yep.
And I can only give you, for me, why I'm a Christian and not a Muslim. For me, the way of Jesus and the relationship with God through Jesus does away with fear.
Yep.
And, you know, John, the disciple of Jesus, says, you know, perfect love casts out all fear. And there's this remarkable encounters with Jesus. Is the one who welcomes, who takes away fear. Mm. My experience of religion, whether it's the abuse of Christianity, that we talk about in the Middle Ages, the use of violence, whether it's any form of ritual religion, whatever it is, it's often centered around fear. You must believe this. You cannot believe something different to my family. You must do these religious rituals. You must conform. You must obey. And Christianity is unique in giving freedom and the grace to choose love rather than to be afraid of it. Mm. Forms of Christianity that I don't subscribe to have fallen, in my view, into religion. Mm. So what I would want to say is, I think that God is the one who wants to take fear away. He wants to set us free. He wants to bring love and grace. And that, for me, is the distinctive from other religions. That's not to say that there is not great things in other religions and great people and beautiful people who are seeking to serve their understanding of God. But for me, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And that is quite a radically arrogant statement. So what is he offering that's completely different? And it is this forgiveness. It is this grace. It is this, the Bible talks about it, he loves us first. And because he loves us, we respond. Mm-hmm. So it's not that I have to do things to be loved by God. It's that he already loves me, and that love changes me. And I think that's fundamentally unique to Jesus, and it's fundamentally unique to Christianity. And so that's a big reason why I would follow Jesus. I've looked into other religions. Admittedly, yes, I looked into them as a Christian. But for me, it's always been important to try and seek truth. Mm-hmm. And I've tried to expose myself to different points of view. I think that's an important thing for me to do. I want to understand why people take different points of view. And I guess sort of the final thing on that is that it makes complete rational sense to me that if God loves the world, he would come to earth. Yeah. And so I want to look for where is there appearing to be an appearance of God. And what would I think God would be like? Would he be powerful and violent, or would he be gentle and humble? And the Christmas story, which we're going to approach in a few weeks, to me sums up how I think God would be: understated, quiet, gentle. It's rare in other religions to have a concept that God becomes a human being. In fact, most of the other religions consider that to be blasphemous. But to me, that makes perfect sense. If I want to save humanity, I've got to come among them. So to me, there's lots of ways in which Christianity makes much more sense. So I would encourage people to look into the place of fear. And we'll keep coming back to this when you come back conspiracy theories and all these things. Look where the fear is. And when we come to Jesus, we need to be free from fear.
Absolutely. And as you say, I think there are a lot of good things that we can learn from other religions.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of great practices. There are a lot of great people. I mean, we have links with lots of people here, different faiths, because we think that's really important. We don't want to judge and be elitist. We want to encourage everybody. But ultimately, we believe that it's Jesus, that Jesus is the one who points the way to heaven. And this whole thing about fear for me is really, really important, because I think as I look at other religions, the onus is on the individual. And the fear is on the individual. If you are not good enough, you are not going to make it. So life becomes more of a legalistic chore, that I have to do this, I have to do that, rather than a response to a God who loves me and says, come as you are, because of Jesus, I can transform your life. And that is radical. That is the only religion that as you say, goes in that direction. It is absolutely incredible. And I think, why would I want to jump through 1,000 hoops when I'm invited and I'm asked to just say, I've stuffed up, I'm sorry, I want to go your way?
I've got 3 sons, I've got 3 kids, and I can see the attraction of control whereby they have to believe what I believe, and that I use fear and intimidation and isolation and rejection should they choose not to be Christians. But ultimately, I rejoice that Christianity isn't like that, and that I continue to love them, whatever their faith choices are, and there's no question of anybody being put out of the family or being rejected, or no need to conform. And one of the things that's difficult is that lots of us experience our kids not following our faith. But I would far rather that freedom and that choice than any religion that uses the community to control.
I followed various missionaries and mission agencies, and some of them each day give a little prayer request. And today there was a prayer request for a lady who lived in a Middle Eastern country, and she got married quite young. Her husband rejected her when he found out she couldn't have children. So she then decided to adopted a son, and miraculously became a Christian. Completely transformed her life. The son obviously discovers this and beat her black and blue and kicked her out of the house and has completely disowned her. And she just said, please pray for me, because I love Jesus and I know that he's the way and I don't want to give that up. But I love my son too. And so she's stuck in this situation where life is incredibly difficult, that she's gone against everybody else. But for me, again, that we go back to the first ever Christians. That says something about why you pursue Christianity in the face of great persecution. Even today, people are like, there is something about Jesus and my relationship with him that is so incredible, that it is truth, that is all life-changing and consuming, that even in the midst of the most horrific situations, but I still believe, I still love him, because that's a transformation that he brings, because he is the truth. Because it isn't about the fear, it isn't about the rejection, it isn't about the legalism and having to be perfect. It's about the love, and I love that. Now, we've talked about this a little bit before, but I want to just chuck it in there, just because we're talking about the truth. Talk about Jesus being the truth. We also talk about the Bible being the truth. Just remind us how we know that it is actually what God intended, that it's not man-made, that it's not, this is what we've decided to write so that you will follow and believe.
Yeah, I mean, the Bible, it's a belief that it's true. There are lots of historical accuracies in it, lots of things that are historically true. But essentially, I believe it to be true for 2 major reasons. Once I believe in God, and I believe that God will come to earth, I find it difficult to believe that he would allow the record of that to be inaccurate. So for me, a God that can make the universe, that can make the woodpecker, which I often talk about, that can make all these wonderful things that we celebrate in nature, I think he can make sure that the Bible tells us what we need to know. But the second thing is that the way the Bible is that it was firstly a collection over a couple of thousand years of different people's writings that come together, and that was put together by a group of people who looked over various texts, and when they were unanimous on something, they felt that was scriptural. And I like that idea that it's not one person's idea. It's not one person's writings. It's not one person's decision. It's a collective, and I think that's the way God works. He works through the community of people. The Bible is critical of the people who were the first leaders of the church. If the disciples, frankly, had written it themselves, if they made bits up, they would have taken out the way Peter is presented.
Yeah.
Peter, we know, is the first leader of the Christian church.
Yeah.
That's a fact. What is also a fact is that the New Testament portrays him as a bit of quite a large part of an idiot.
Hothead.
A hothead.
Yeah.
He denies Jesus. He betrays Jesus. He fails. He doesn't have enough faith. If the disciples were making that up, they would have taken that stuff out. They would have also taken out that which was culturally really difficult for them and really challenging. And in particular, the way in which the New Testament gives equality and value to women and to foreigners, the Samaritans in particular.
Yep.
Those two things were extremely culturally difficult. And again, they would have taken those out if they weren't true. So for me, it's probable, more probable than any other text that claims to be divine. It is more probable that the Bible is true. And lastly, I built my life around Scripture. I think I would have found out by now if it wasn't true.
There's a really funny little bit in the scriptures where one of the gospel writers, and I'll leave folks to go and read the gospels, Jesus has risen from the dead, and he comments in his gospel that he and another disciple raced to the tomb to see where Jesus was, and he was the one that got there first. Just makes me chuckle. Of all the things that you're ever going to say about the resurrection of Jesus, I won the race. Just made me laugh. Just to human little bits in it, but you're completely right. It is trustworthy. So I've had a message in from Steve, and he said, Donald, at times things that may actually be true end up being untrue after the Chinese whisper chain has added or removed part of the relevant statement. I always found that if you are unsure, go to the source for confirmation before wrongly interpreting things. How would you deal with this?
I think that's absolutely true. I think one of the things that we understand, so the Bible talks a lot about gossip, and it says, we're not to be engaged in it.
Yeah.
Part of the human condition is that we love to tell somebody something that they've never heard before because for whatever reason it makes us feel slightly important, slightly, we didn't know that. That is a tremendously dangerous human attribute because it means that there is a pressure on us to tell somebody something they didn't know. And as Steve says, that can either be right from scratch that we tell somebody something that's not true, or we just add a little bit part of the story. There's a Chinese whispers. We use a certain way of describing something that isn't exactly, and those words are interpreted by somebody else, and it gets bigger and it gets larger, and so on and so forth. So I really think passing on stuff is a very dangerous game. It's maybe one of the reasons why I'm not on social media, that there is a blessing and a benefit to passing on good stuff. But we need to challenge in ourselves the attraction of passing on something that's shocking or salacious or incredible or unbelievable and frightening. And I think human beings like to tell other people things that are frightening. We talked about that on the Halloween thing, and I don't think that's really helpful. And I think, therefore, understanding where something came from is really important, as Steve says, going back to the source. When was this first said? Who first said this? Where has this come from? What motive might they have had for saying that? Was there a financial advantage, a commercial advantage? Has this come from a group who are interested in destabilizing humanity? Has this come from somebody who wants to be noticed, who wants to be a celebrity, who wants to be popular? And I think a lot of the conspiracy theories, when we dig back, if we can ever get to where they came from, they originate in these kinds of places. They originate from people who want to be the center of attention. They want to be able to tell you something that you didn't know. And I think that's very, very damaging and dangerous.
So if we bring it down to not necessarily a celebrity level, but to our level, how do we deal with the truth? How do we protect the truth? I mean, we talked a little bit about going back to the source, but how do we do that in our everyday relationships? How can we be people of the truth?